The rusted sign swung in the dry wind, creaking like a broken promise. Welcome to Eldridge, population 873. Samuel Winslow stood beneath it, squinting against the setting sun, a folded $10 bill clutched in his hand. Dust devils swirled around his boots as he surveyed what remained of Main Street, a row of sagging wooden storefronts with broken windows and faded paint, their shadows stretching long across the cracked pavement. He'd driven 6 hours from the city to stand in this forgotten place. The real estate agent hadn't even bothered to meet him here, just mailed him the deed after cashing his check. $10 for an entire town. The joke of it almost made him smile. Samuel walked past the old general store, its shelves still visible through the grimy windows. A calendar hung on the wall inside, frozen on March 1952. He tried the door and found it unlocked. The hinges protested as he pushed it open, releasing the smell of dust and forgotten things. "Hello?" he called, though he knew no one would answer. His voice echoed back at him, bouncing off empty shelves and bare walls. Samuel moved deeper into the store, his footsteps leaving prints in the dust. A newspaper lay yellowed on the counter, headlines about Eisenhower and the Korean War. A coffee mug sat beside it, lipstick still on the rim. It was as if everyone had simply walked away one day and never returned. Samuel had been a janitor at Westridge High School for 15 years. Every night he mopped the same floors, emptied the same trash cans, listened to the echoes of teenage lives that barely registered his existence. His apartment was a single room above a laundromat, walls thin enough to hear his neighbors' arguments and lovemaking. The only photograph he kept was of his ex-wife and daughter, taken before the divorce, before Ellie moved them 3 states away. He'd found the listing for Eldridge by accident, scrolling through property auctions on his phone during lunch break. Historic ghost town, price to sell. The county wanted to unload it, tired of carrying it on the tax rolls. $10 was symbolic. The real cost would be in what came after. Samuel had no plan when he clicked purchase. Just a feeling like vertigo, like stepping off a cliff to see if he could fly. Now, standing in this hollow shell of a town, he wondered what he'd been thinking. Outside the general store, the wind picked up, whistling through broken windows. For a moment, Samuel thought he heard voices carried on that wind, laughter, maybe, or the murmur of conversation. He turned quickly, but there was only dust and silence. He spent that first night in his truck, parked in front of what had once been the town hall. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by strange dreams. People in old-fashioned clothes walking the streets, nodding to him as they passed. A woman in a blue dress, standing at a window, watching him with sad eyes. Morning light revealed the town in all its decrepit glory. Besides the Main Street buildings, there were maybe 40 houses scattered around, a small church with a listing steeple, and a schoolhouse with swings still hanging in the yard. Everything weathered by decades of neglect, but surprisingly intact. Samuel walked through each building, making notes in a small pad. Broken windows, leaking roofs, rotting floorboards. The list grew longer with each structure, but something else grew alongside it, a strange sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He started with the smallest house on the edge of town, swept out the dust and debris, patched the roof with materials from the abandoned hardware store, replaced the broken windows with intact ones from other buildings. It was like solving a puzzle, finding what worked, what could be salvaged. At night, exhausted from labor, he'd sit on the porch of his reclaimed house and look out at the town. Sometimes, in the spaces between heartbeats, he thought he saw lights in windows that had no electricity, heard music from the boarded-up dance hall. "You're losing it, old man," he told himself, but the feeling persisted. 3 weeks into his stay, Samuel found the basement of the town hall. The door had been hidden behind a fallen bookcase. Steps led down into darkness that his flashlight barely penetrated. The air smelled of mildew and something else, ink and paper and the faint scent of perfume. Filing cabinets lined the walls, drawers pulled open, papers scattered across the floor as if someone had searched frantically for something. In the center of the room stood a large table, and on it, a leather-bound book, the town census. Samuel brushed dust from its cover, opened it carefully. Pages of names, dates of birth and death, marriages and children. The history of Eldridge written in neat columns and rows. The last entry was dated March 15, 1952, the same date on the calendar in the general store. As he flipped through the pages, a loose sheet fell out. It was a letter, the paper yellowed with age, the handwriting delicate and precise. "To whom it may concern," it began. "If you are reading this, then you have found what I have hidden. The truth about Eldridge must be preserved. We were not abandoned. We were erased." The letter was signed Clara Bennett, town clerk. Samuel read it 3 times, trying to make sense of the cryptic message. Erased? By whom? And why? He searched through the scattered papers, finding more letters, newspaper clippings, official documents. They told a fragmented story, a government project, a nearby military installation, something about radiation and contamination. Orders to evacuate, protests, and then silence. The final documents were death certificates, dozens of them, all dated within weeks of each other in early 1952. That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. He sat on his porch, the census book in his lap, reading names by flashlight. John and Mary Peterson, their children Thomas and Sarah. Frank Miller, the barber. Eliza Winters, who taught at the school. Clara Bennett, whose letter had started him on this trail. I'm sorry, he whispered to the darkness. I'm sorry this happened to you. The wind answered, carrying what sounded like a sigh. In the morning, Samuel woke with new determination. He pinned the names from the census to his wall, began to match them with houses and businesses. John Peterson had owned the general store. Frank Miller's barber shop still had his name on the window. Clara Bennett had lived in a small blue house behind the town hall. He started cleaning Clara's house next, feeling a connection to the woman whose words had reached across decades to find him. As he swept her floor and washed her windows, he talked to her as if she might be listening. I was nobody before I came here, he told the empty rooms. Invisible, just taking up space until I stopped breathing. But here I feel like I matter. One evening, as sunset painted the sky in shades of fire, Samuel sat on Clara's porch with a cup of coffee. A movement caught his eye, a figure walking down Main Street. He stood quickly, coffee forgotten. Hello, he called. The figure turned, a woman in a blue dress, her face in shadow. She raised a hand, as if in greeting, then continued walking. By the time Samuel reached the spot, she was gone. That night, he dreamed of Clara, not as a ghost or a vision, but as a woman sitting across from him at her kitchen table, smiling as she poured tea. You're doing good work, Samuel, she said. But there's more to be done. What happened here? He asked. What did they do to you? Her smile faded. They made us disappear, but we didn't go far. He woke with the echo of her voice in his ears and a new urgency in his heart. The next day, a truck arrived from the county assessor's office. A young woman in a business suit stepped out, clipboard in hand. Mr. Winslow? I'm Jennifer Hayes from the county. We're conducting the 10-year census, and since you're now the official resident of Eldridge. Samuel invited her into his house, offered her coffee. She seemed surprised by the work he'd done, the care he'd taken. Most people who buy these old towns just want to strip them for materials, she said. But you're actually living here. It's home now, Samuel said simply. She nodded, making notes. Well, for the census, I just need to confirm population is 1, correct? Just you. Samuel hesitated, thinking of the names on his wall, the figures he sometimes glimpsed from the corner of his eye. For now, he said. But I'm expecting visitors. After she left, Samuel returned to Clara's house. The letter he'd found mentioned something hidden, something beyond the census book. He searched every inch of the house, tapping walls for hollow spaces, checking floorboards for loose planks. He found it in the bedroom, beneath a floorboard under the bed. A small metal box, locked but not rusted. The key was on a chain around a photograph of a young woman. Clara, he assumed. Her eyes seemed to follow him as he opened the box. Inside were more documents, but also personal items. A wedding ring. A lock of hair tied with blue ribbon. A small silver locket containing a tiny photograph of a man in uniform. And at the bottom, another letter, addressed simply, to the one who remembers. If you have found this, it read, then you are the one we have waited for. Eldridge was more than a town. It was a covenant. We lived together, died together, and promised to remain together. But to be counted, to be remembered, this is what we need. On the night of the census at midnight, stand in the town square. Speak our names. Count us among the living once more. The letter ended with a date, the same date the census worker had mentioned, just 3 days away. Samuel spent those days in a fever of activity. He cleaned the town square, repaired the old gazebo at its center, hung lights from poles and trees. He wasn't sure what would happen at midnight on census day, but he wanted the town to look its best. He also studied the census book, memorizing names and faces from the faded photographs he'd found. These people had been erased, forgotten. He wouldn't let that happen again. On the appointed night, Samuel dressed in his best clothes, the suit he'd worn to his daughter's graduation, the last time he'd seen her. He brought the census book to the gazebo, set it on a small table with a candle burning beside it. As midnight approached, The wind died completely. The air felt charged like the moment before a thunderstorm. Samuel stood in the gazebo, watching the empty streets, waiting. The church bell tolled midnight, though its mechanisms had long since rusted away. "My name is Samuel Winslow," he said into the silence. "I am the caretaker of Eldridge. I am here to count those who have been uncounted, to remember those who have been forgotten." He opened the census book and began to read the names. John Peterson, Mary Peterson, Thomas Peterson, Sarah Peterson. With each name, the air seemed to thicken. Shadows gathered at the edges of the square. Frank Miller, Eliza Winters, Robert James, Susan James. The shadows took form, figures moving toward the gazebo, their outlines becoming more solid with each step. William Clark, Hannah Clark, Joseph Brown, Elizabeth Brown. They filled the square now, men and women in the clothes of another era, children holding their parents' hands. Their faces were clear in the candlelight, not transparent or ghostly, but solid and real. Samuel's voice grew stronger as he continued, recognizing faces from photographs, nodding to each person as they approached. "Clara Bennett," he said finally, looking up from the book. She stood before him, the woman in the blue dress from his dreams, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You came," she said simply. "I was always going to come," Samuel replied, though he hadn't known it until this moment. "I just took a while to find my way." Clara gestured to the gathered crowd. "We've been waiting for someone to count us, to make us real again." "What happened to you?" Samuel asked. "The documents I found." "They were testing weapons," Clara said. "Not far from here. They told us it was safe, but it wasn't. When people started getting sick, they covered it up, evacuated us to temporary housing. But there was nothing temporary about it. We died there, one by one, while they erased Eldridge from the maps." "I'm sorry," Samuel said, the words inadequate against such a wrong. "Don't be sorry," Clara said. "Be our witness. Tell our story. Keep us in the census." The crowd murmured agreement. Faces turned to Samuel with hope and expectation. "I will," he promised. "But how?" "You're here now, but tomorrow." "We're always here," Clara said. "You felt us, haven't you? In the wind, in the silence between heartbeats. We never left. We just needed someone to see us." She reached out, her hand cool but solid against his. "Will you count us, Samuel? Will you make us part of the living world again?" Samuel looked at the faces surrounding him, not ghosts, but people who had been wronged, who deserved to be remembered. He thought of his own invisible life, how close he had come to disappearing without trace or memory. "Yes," he said, "I will count you." He took up a pen, opened the census book to a new page, and began to write. Name after name, face after face. The residents of Eldridge lined up patiently, each stepping forward to be counted, to be acknowledged, to be made real again. As dawn approached, the last name was entered. 873 souls, accounted for at last. The figures began to fade with the first light, becoming translucent, then mere outlines, then nothing but memory. Clara was the last to go. She stood before Samuel, her form already growing indistinct. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing us home." "Will I see you again?" Samuel asked. "We're always here," she repeated. "This is our covenant. We remain together, in life and in death. And now, you're part of that covenant too." She leaned forward, her lips cool against his cheek, and then she was gone, not in a dramatic flash or swirl of light, but simply gone, like a candle flame extinguished. Samuel stood alone in the gazebo as the sun rose over Eldridge. But he wasn't truly alone anymore. He could feel them now, not as ghosts or spirits, but as presences, in the creak of a floorboard, the rustle of curtains, the way sunlight fell across a room. When Jennifer Hayes returned a week later, she found Samuel painting the town hall. "Mr. Winslow," she called, climbing out of her truck. "I need to verify some information for the census." Samuel climbed down from his ladder, wiping paint from his hands. "What information?" "Well," she said, looking uncomfortable, "the thing is, I entered your data, population 1, but the system keeps changing it. Every time I submit the form, it reverts to the original population count from the 1950 census. 873. Samuel smiled. "That sounds about right." "But that's impossible," she protested. "There's only you here." "Is there?" Samuel asked, gesturing to the town around them. "Look closer." For a moment, just a moment, Jennifer's eyes widened. Samuel knew what she was seeing, the briefest glimpse of Eldridge as it had been, streets filled with people going about their lives, children playing, shopkeepers sweeping their storefronts. I don't understand," she whispered. You don't have to understand, Samuel said gently. Just count us. All of us. Jennifer looked down at her clipboard, then back at the town. Something in her face shifted, acceptance replacing confusion. Population 874, she said, making a note. Including you. Including me, Samuel agreed. After she drove away, Samuel returned to his painting. As he worked, he felt Clara's presence beside him, heard her voice in the wind. Welcome home, she whispered. Samuel nodded, continuing his work. The sign above the town hall door took shape under his brush. Eldridge, population 874. Not a ghost town anymore, but a town of ghosts and one living man who had finally found where he belonged. In the distance, the church bell rang, though no hand pulled its rope. Samuel smiled and kept painting, surrounded by the invisible lives that had become more real to him than the world he'd left behind.